Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, Episode 6. In the evening of my visit to the Heights, I knew, as well as if I saw him, that Mr. Heathcliff was about the place. I still carried his letter in my pocket. I had made up my mind not to give it till my master went somewhere, as I could not guess how its receipt would affect Catherine. The consequence was that it did not reach her till the 4th day, Sunday, and I brought it into her room after the family had gone to church. Mrs. Linton's appearance was altered, as I had told Heathcliff, but when she was calm there seemed unearthly beauty in the change. The flash of her eyes had been succeeded by a dreamy and melancholy softness. They no longer gave the impression of looking at the objects around her, they appeared always to gaze far beyond. You would have said out of this world. The paleness of her face stamped her as one doomed to decay. "There's a letter for you, Mrs. Linton," I said. "You must read it immediately, because it wants an answer. Shall I break the seal?" "Yes," she answered, without altering the direction of her eyes. "Now," I continued, "read it." She drew away her hand and let it fall. I replaced it in her lap and stood waiting for her to glance down so long that at last I said, "Must I read it, ma'am? It is from Mr. Heathcliff." There was a start and a troubled gleam of recollection and a struggle to arrange her ideas. She lifted the letter and seemed to pursue it, and when she came to the signature she sighed. Yet she had not gathered its import, for upon my desiring to hear her reply, she merely pointed to the name. "Well, he wishes to see you," said I, guessing her need of an interpreter. "He's in the garden by this time, and impatient to know what answer I shall bring." As I spoke, a step traversed the hall. The open house was too tempting for Heathcliff to resist walking in. With straining eagerness, Catherine gazed towards the entrance of her chamber. The door opened, and in a stride or two he was at her side and had her grasped in his arms. He neither spoke nor loosed his hold for some 5 minutes, and I plainly saw that he could hardly bear to look into her face. He knew from the instant he beheld her that she was fated sure to die. "Oh, Cathy! Oh, my life! How can I bear it?" was the first sentence he uttered, in a tone that did not seek to disguise his despair. "What now?" said Catherine, leaning back. "You and Edgar have broken my heart, Heathcliff, and you both came to bewail the deed to me, as if you were the people to be pitied. I shall not pity you, not I. You have killed me and thriven on it. I think how strong you are. How many years do you mean to live after I am gone?" Heathcliff had knelt down on one knee to embrace her. He attempted to rise, but she seized his hair and kept him down. "I wish I could hold you," she continued bitterly. "Till we were both dead, I shouldn't care what you suffered. Why shouldn't you suffer? I do. Will you be happy when I am in the earth?" "Don't torture me till I'm as mad as yourself," cried he, wrenching his head free. "You know you lie to say I have killed you, and you know that I could as soon forget you as my existence. It is not sufficient for your selfishness that while you are at peace I shall be in hell." "I shall not be at peace," moaned Catherine. "I'm not wishing you greater torment than I have, Heathcliff. I only wish us never to be parted. Come here and kneel down again. You never harmed me in your life. Won't you come here again? Do." In her eagerness, she rose and supported herself on the arm of a chair. At that earnest appeal he turned to her, looking absolutely desperate. An instant they held apart, and then they were locked in an embrace from which I thought my mistress would never be released alive. Catherine put up her hand to clasp his neck and bring her cheek to his as he held her, while he, in return, covering her with frantic caresses, said wildly, "You teach me now how cruel you've been, cruel and false. Why did you betray your own heart, Cathy? You have killed yourself. Yes, you may kiss me and cry and wring out my kisses and tears. They'll blight you. They'll damn you. You loved me. Then what right had you to leave me? What right? Answer me for the poor fancy you felt for Linton. Because nothing that God or Satan could inflict would have parted us. You of your own will. I have not broken your heart. You have broken it. And in breaking it, you have broken mine. So much the worse for me that I am strong. Do I want to live? What kind of living will it be when you... Oh God! Would you like me to live with your soul in the grave?" "Let me alone, let me alone," sobbed Catherine. "If I've done wrong, I'm dying for it. It is enough. You left me too, but I won't upbraid you. I forgive you. Forgive me." "It is hard to forgive, and to look at those eyes and feel those wasted hands. Kiss me again and don't let me see your eyes. I forgive what you have done to me. I love my murderer, but yours? How can I?" They were silent, their faces hid against each other and washed by each other's tears. At least, I suppose, the weeping was on both sides, as it seemed Heathcliff could weep on a great occasion like this. I grew very uncomfortable, meanwhile, for the afternoon wore fast away, and I could distinguish a concourse thickening outside Gimmerton Chapel. "Service is over," I announced. "My master will be here in half an hour." Heathcliff groaned a curse and strained Catherine closer. She never moved. Ere long, I perceived a group of the servants passing up the road. Mr. Linton was not far behind. He opened the gate and sauntered slowly up. "Now he is here," I exclaimed. "For heaven's sake, hurry down. You'll not meet anyone on the front stairs. Do be quick, and stay among the trees till he is in." "I must go, Cathy," said Heathcliff, seeking to extricate himself from her arms. "But if I live, I'll see you again before you are asleep. I won't stray 5 yards from your window." "You must not go," she answered, holding him as firmly as her strength allowed. "You shall not, I tell you." "For 1 hour," he pleaded earnestly. "Not for 1 minute," she replied. "I must. Linton will be up immediately," persisted the alarmed intruder. He would have risen, but she clung fast, gasping. There was mad resolution in her face. "No! Oh, don't go! It is the last time. Edgar will not hurt us, Heathcliff. I shall die! "Damn the fool! There he is!" cried Heathcliff, sinking back into his seat. "Hush, my darling. Hush, hush, Catherine. I'll stay. If he shoots me, I'll expire with a blessing on my lips." And there they were, fast again. I heard my master mounting the stairs. The cold sweat ran from my forehead. I was horrified. "Are you going to listen to her ravings?" I said passionately. "She does not know what she says. Will you ruin her because she has not the wit to help herself? Get up! You could be free instantly. That is the most diabolical deed that you ever did. We are all done for, master, mistress, and servant." I cried out, and Mr. Linton hastened his step at the noise. In the midst of my agitation, I was sincerely glad to observe that Catherine's arms had fallen relaxed, and her head hung down. "She's fainted or dead," I thought. "So much the better. Far better that she should be dead than lingering a burden and a misery-maker to all about her." Edgar sprang to his unbidden guest, white with astonishment and rage. What he meant to do I cannot tell. However, the other stopped all demonstrations at once by placing the lifeless-looking form in his arms. "Look here," he said, "unless you be a fiend, help her first, then you shall speak to me." He walked into the parlour and sat down. Mr. Linton and I, with great difficulty, managed to restore her to sensation, but she was all bewildered. She sighed and moaned and knew nobody. Edgar, in his anxiety for her, forgot her hated friend. I did not. I went at the earliest opportunity and besought him to depart, affirming that Catherine was better, and he should hear from me in the morning how she passed the night. "I shall stay in the garden, and Nelly, mind you keep your word tomorrow. I shall be under those trees. Mind, or I pay another visit, whether Linton be in or not." About 12 o'clock that night was born the Catherine that you saw at Wuthering Heights, a puny 7-month child, and 2 hours after the mother died. Edgar's distress at his bereavement is a subject too painful to be dwelt on. Its after effects showed how deep the sorrow sunk. A great addition, in my eyes, was his being left without an heir, and I mentally abused old Linton for securing his estate to his own daughter instead of his son's. Next morning, bright and cheerful out of doors, I quit the room soon after sunrise to see Mr. Heathcliff. He would have heard the gallop of the messenger going to Gimmerton, and would be aware, from the lights flitting to and fro, that all was not right within. I wished, yet I feared, to find him. At my approach he raised his eyes and spoke. "She's dead," he said. "I've not waited for you to learn that. Put your handkerchief away, damn you all! She wants none of your tears." I was weeping as much for him as her. We do sometimes pity creatures that have none of the feeling either for themselves or others. "Yes, she's dead," I answered, checking my sobs. "How did—" He endeavoured to pronounce her name, but could not manage it, and he held a silent combat with his inward agony. How did she die?" he resumed, at last, trembling, in spite of himself, to his very finger ends. "Poor wretch," I thought, "you have a heart and nerves the same as your brother men. Why should you be anxious to conceal them? Your pride cannot blind God." Quietly as a lamb, I answered aloud. "And did she ever mention me?" he asked, hesitating. "Her senses never returned. She recognised nobody from the time you left her," I said. "She lies with a sweet smile on her face, and her latest ideas wandered back to pleasant early days. Her life closed in a gentle dream. May she wake as kindly in the other world." "May she wake in torment!" he cried. "Why, she's a liar to the end. Where is she? Not there, not in heaven, not perished. Where? Oh, you said you cared nothing for my sufferings, and I pray one prayer, Catherine Earnshaw, may you not rest as long as I am living. You said I killed you. Haunt me then. The murdered do haunt their murderers, I believe. I know that ghosts have wandered on earth. Be with me always. Take any form. Drive me mad. Only do not leave me in this abyss where I cannot find you. Oh God, I cannot live without my life, my soul." He thundered a command for me to go, and I obeyed. The place of Catherine's interment, to the surprise of the villagers, was neither in the chapel under the carved monument of the Lintons, nor yet by the tombs of her own relations. Outside, it was dug on a green slope in a corner of the churchyard, where the wall is so low that Heather has climbed over it from the moor. Her husband lies in the same spot now, and they have each a simple headstone to mark the graves. That Friday brought rain first, and then snow. On the morrow, I was sitting in the lonely parlour with the child on my knee when the door opened and someone entered, out of breath. "I have run the whole way from Wuthering Heights," she cried. "Don't be alarmed. There shall be an explanation as soon as I can give it. Only please order the carriage to take me on to Gimmerton, and tell a servant to seek up a few clothes in my wardrobe." The intruder was Mrs. Heathcliff. Her hair and frock were dripping with snow and water, and she had a deep cut under one ear. "My dear young lady," I exclaimed, "I'll do nothing till you put on dry things, and certainly you shall not go to Gimmerton tonight." "I shall," she said, "walking or riding." And not till after the coachman had been instructed to get ready and a maid set to pack up some necessary attire did I obtain her consent for binding the wound and helping to change her garments. "Now, Ellen," she said, "this is the last thing of his I have." She slipped the gold ring from her third finger and threw it on the fire. "There, he shall buy another if he gets me back again." I inquired what had urged her to escape from Wuthering Heights, and where she meant to go, as she refused to remain with us. "I ought, and I wish to remain, to cheer Edgar and take care of the baby, and because the Grange is my right home. But I tell you he wouldn't let me. Do you think he could bear to see me happy, and could bear to think that we were tranquil? Now I am sure that he detests me, to the point of its annoying him seriously to have me within earshot or eyesight. I feel pretty certain that he would not chase me over England. Supposing I contrive to clear escape, and therefore I must get quite away. I've recovered from my first desire to be killed by him. I'd rather he killed himself. He's not a human being. I gave him my heart, and he took it, and he pinched it to death, and he flung it back to me. People feel with their hearts, Ellen, and since he has destroyed mine, I have not power to feel for him. Yesterday, you know, Mr. Earnshaw should have been at the funeral, but instead he sat down by the fire and swallowed brandy by tumblerfuls. Heathcliff has been a stranger in the house from last Sunday until today. Yesterday evening I sat reading till late on towards 12. The silence was broken at length by the sound of the kitchen latch. Heathcliff had returned from his watch earlier than usual, owing, I suppose, to the sudden storm. That entrance was fastened, and we heard him coming round to get in by the other. I rose with an expression of what I felt on my lips. Mr. Earnshaw turned and looked at me. "I'll keep him out 5 minutes," he exclaimed. "You won't object?" "No, you may keep him out the whole night for me," I answered. "Turn the key in the lock." He accomplished this before Heathcliff reached the front. "You and I," he said, "have a great debt to settle with the man out yonder. If we were neither of us cowards, we might combine to discharge it. Are you willing to endure to the last, and not once attempt a repayment?" "I'm weary of enduring now," I replied, "and I'd be glad of a retaliation that wouldn't recoil on myself. But treachery and violence are spears pointed at both ends. They wound those who resort to them worse than their enemies." "Treachery and violence are a just return for treachery and violence," cried Hindley. "Mrs. Heathcliff, I'll ask you to do nothing but sit still and be dumb. I'm sure you would have as much pleasure as I in witnessing the conclusion of the fiend's existence. He'll be your death, and he'll be my ruin. Damn the hellish villain! He knocks at the door as if he were the master here already. Promise to hold your tongue, and before that clock strikes, it wants 3 minutes at 1, you're a free woman." He took the implements which I described to you in my letter from his breast. I seized his arm. "I'll not hold my tongue," I said. "You mustn't touch him. Let the door remain shut and be quiet." "No, I've formed my resolution, and by God I'll execute it," cried the desperate being. I might as well have struggled with a bear or reasoned with a lunatic. The only resource left to me was to run to a window and warn his intended victim of the fate which awaited him. "You'd better seek shelter somewhere else tonight," I exclaimed in rather a triumphant tone. "Mr. Earnshaw has a mind to shoot you if you persist in endeavouring to enter." "You'd better open the door," he answered. "I shall not meddle," I retorted again. "Come in and get shot if you please. I've done my duty." With that, I shut the window and returned to my place by the fire. The window behind me was banged on to the floor by a blow from Heathcliff, but the bars stood too close to suffer his shoulders to follow. "Isabella, let me in, or I'll make you repent." "I cannot commit murder," I replied. "Mr. Hindley has a knife and a loaded pistol." "Let me in by the kitchen door," he said. "Hindley will be there before me," I answered, "and that's a poor love of yours that cannot bear a shower of snow. We were left at peace in our beds as long as the summer moon shone, but the moment a blast of winter returns you must run for shelter, Heathcliff. If I were you, I'd go stretch myself over her grave and die like a faithful dog. The world is surely not worth living now, is it? You had distinctly impressed upon me that the idea that Catherine was the whole joy of your life. I can't imagine how you think of surviving her loss." "He's there, is he?" exclaimed Hindley, rushing to the gap. Heathcliff reached through to grab the weapon and wrenched it from his grasp. The charge exploded, and the knife, in springing back, closed into its owner's wrist. Heathcliff pulled it away by main force, slitting up the flesh as it passed on, and thrust it dripping into his pocket. He then took a stone, struck down the division between two windows, and sprang in. His adversary had fallen senseless with the flow of blood. The ruffian kicked and trampled on him, and dashed his head repeatedly against the stone floor. But getting out of breath, he finally desisted and dragged the apparently lifeless body onto the settle. I lost no time in seeking the old servant. "Come, Joseph," thundered Heathcliff. "Your master's mad. I'm not going to nurse him. Wash that stuff away." Heathcliff gave him a push onto his knees in the middle of the blood and flung a towel to him. "And you conspire with him against me, do you?" said the tyrant, turning to me. "There, that is fit work for you." He shook me till my teeth rattled and threw me beside Joseph. Mr. Earnshaw presently regained consciousness. Heathcliff, aware that he was ignorant of the treatment received while insensible, called him deliriously intoxicated and advised him to get to bed. To my joy, he left us, and I departed to my own room, marvelling that I had escaped so easily.